Welcome to Threaded Minds, Law and Beyond with Suhaib Zada. This podcast is your space to explore the intersections of law, business, personal growth, and modern life. I'm your host, Suhaib Zada. Together, we will unravel the threads that shape our world.
Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Kate Flynn. I've been waiting so long for this episode to come, so I'm very glad that we have you here. Dr. Kate, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Thank you. So, I titled this episode today as From Lawyer to Leader, the Psychology of Scaling a Law Firm, which is an interesting topic given the challenges we have right now in the legal practice and establishing or founding a law firm. Before
Yep.
we begin with this whole topic, I'd like to ask you, who is Dr. Kate Flynn and what does she offer to law services, law firms?
Sure. So, by training, I am a developmental psychologist, which some people are aware of the different subdisciplines of psychology, others aren't. But developmental psychologists focus on development across the lifespan. So, from all different angles. Mine, in particular, was social emotional development across the lifespan. So, early childhood all the way through death. And following my postdoc, I started buying and selling businesses that had nothing to do with psychology. So for about a decade, I took a left turn and became an entrepreneur. I started, I think I'm on business 7 now. But I started from scratch, bought businesses, ran them, and sold a handful of them, and yeah, just had a lot of fun doing that. All things business. So now what I do is advise service-based professionals, mostly law firms, helping them scale using systems and growing themselves as well as their leadership team psychologically, to be able to handle scaling, because both of those things have to happen simultaneously.
I'm so glad that you're also specialized in psychology. We're going to combine some questions in psychology and some questions in
Yeah,
entrepreneurship.
yeah, you
Um,
really can't disentangle the two. They really are one and the same for me.
of course, yeah. So I understand, I was reading through your bio that you turned into a business strategist from psychology.
Hmm.
Could you walk us through when you made that decision and what was the difference between psychologist and business strategist?
Well, and there was an interim step there. So I became a psychologist, and then for about a decade, I bought, ran, and sold businesses. So it is kind of a natural step after I exited. I guess I don't know how many businesses ago that was, but I had a rather large exit selling to private equity. And then I was like, what next? So this is actually the first role I've ever played where I've married the two, my psychological background and my entrepreneurial background. So what I've tried to do in my advising is both, really pulling from both of those backgrounds. And it's almost, what I've created is everything I needed, or would have liked to have had throughout my entrepreneurial journey. Um, yeah. So I'm basically giving others what I could have used to become a better leader and build um, more robust businesses, throughout my journey.
Interesting. So moving now to my first point with regards to scaling, and my focus in this episode will be on the legal practice. Uh,
Yes.
as we know, many lawyers are exceptional operator. They know how to run the business, they know how to establish a law firm. However, what's the key difference between an operator or a leader? Are there some skills that you feel like make lawyers stuck in the operation of the business, or for example, there are some skills that they need to adapt, especially when we talk right now with the advanced technologies, AI, automation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and with all due respect, I found that many lawyers are not naturally gifted operators of law firms. And that's okay. That's all right. We all have opportunities to grow and develop across our lifespan to become the operators and leaders of businesses. But some are exceptional. I've worked with some naturally gifted operators who have grown into more leadership positions. But really, what you need is, especially in the legal field, is kind of counter to what you need as an operator and leader. And maybe we should clarify definitions here. So, um, what I consider an operator is more a lawyer doing legal work. A leader and an entrepreneur is someone who is running a business. So those are two different things. So yes, I think they're all good at being a lawyer, but running a business and then scaling that business, I guess we're talking about three different things. Um, so what you need to advance from just kind of the operator to being to running a business is one set of skills, and then to scaling that business is another set of skills. So and I've found that a lot of people get stuck in the running of a business, and they kind of plateau because they're still utilizing the same skill set they did as lawyers. And really that is trying to maintain control, working harder, not um it's control. Like if we're gonna narrow it down to one thing, it's control, and being able to relinquish control is what you need to advance through to becoming an entrepreneur, really a leader of a business, a scaling business. Relinquishing control, building smart systems, and relinquishing control. And lawyers are trained to to not do that, to maintain control over every aspect of their case. And that's what makes them a good lawyer. But that's what keeps them at a certain size in their business leadership. I feel like I'm stumbling over
And
my words right now, but I just wanted to clarify kind of what those three things are first.
thank you. Definitely, I totally agree with you. And this is why when we talk about establishing a firm or even running a business, the idea of establishment is easier than maintaining that business and even looking for opportunities to scale that business and becoming, for example, a regional or even international leader of that legal practice. And this is an interesting aspect because I was reading that even some law firms decided to go public, and I think that's in the US. So you can invest or like you have some shares in some law firms, which is probably the maximum scaling stage that you may reach when you establish a law firm is to be public or open for
Yes.
investment.
Yeah, and private equity is very much moving into this space as well. And just like with every industry, people get all up in arms about it and think that private equity is going to erode the entire industry. And it will have an impact, but it it'll be okay. That's the long and short of it at the end of the day. But it does force the entire industry to professionalize operations, because clients are becoming more informed, less tolerant of poor communication, less tolerant of hourly billing that gets out of control. So private equity will change the industry, but it won't upend it entirely.
And from your personal experience, what outdated skills you notice that no longer serve a useful purpose for lawyers when they run their own business?
Yes, the hourly. there are a lot of traditional practices within a law firm that are probably moving towards a need to modernize. Billing is an excellent example of that. Um, the hourly model, and I have thought about this, and I've had lots of discussions with lots of attorneys. I don't have a perfect solution for how it could be modernized. I will say some sort of more hybrid model could work, where there is a fixed fee and then some hourly on top of that. The fact of the matter, and I do get a lot of pushback when I talk to lawyers about this, because they're just like, I don't see how it could be done differently. You can't anticipate how many hours a case will take. I do understand that, and there are lots of industries who have had to go through this as well, and it's a process of estimating correctly, especially with the number of tools that are available. Because there are, it's either adjust and adapt, or certain areas of law may become somewhat obsolete. So there are really cool companies in the family law space. Hello Divorce is an example of kind of a DIY legal process that is developed by lawyers. I'm just giving an example of, this might not be a comfortable conversation to have in terms of overhauling billing structures within law firms, but if we don't have these discussions, the general population is going to become very less tolerant of the cost that attorneys force people to pay. And yeah, so it's got to happen, or people are just going to stop. They're going to find alternatives quicker if those adjustments are not made.
And you're leading me now to touch on the topic of AI and automation in general. When you mentioned, for example, Hello Divorce as a service or something that you can do it yourself, I saw other examples of contract drafting. So you have a list of questions in one subject, let's say employment contract, which is a very common or standardized contract. Yep. You answer questions and you have a fully executed or a perfect draft of the employment contract that you may have. And that leads me to the topic of AI. And we can't talk about the scale or scaling or psychology without touching on it. I covered AI in multiple episodes before, but I would like to touch on it from your psychological and entrepreneurial experience. Are we losing our brains to AI? And also how to balance between the existence, it's a reality right now, while also maintaining being human lawyers.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the way I see it, when used appropriately, I think that we can become, and by we, I'm not an attorney, but lawyers can become better attorneys by using the tool correctly. It is not to replace human brains, but it has capacities that we simply don't have. And so you have to come up with you have to develop your new skill set of learning to work with AI, not replacing one or the other. You can't, no longer is the case where you can ignore that AI exists. You have to use it, or you are going to get behind in that skill development that you need to keep moving forward. Now, you have to use it correctly and appropriately, and correctly and appropriately changes every day because these large language models change all the time. And what's interesting, I was actually having this conversation with a client earlier today, where we've talked about moving towards, like, one of the legal AI platforms is called Eve. I'm very familiar with it. I think it's wonderful. And we kind of pitted it against Claude when drafting a motion to see which would be actually better, which is better. And so both have strengths and weaknesses, and it's incredibly interesting. So anyway, so using it correctly changes every day. Some of the legal specific AI platforms, I will say, have many more guardrails built into it. So you don't have to query and review and edit as much on the back end. But is it producing a better result? I don't know. So it's constantly updating your systems to use it. And that's where I think the difference is, the shift is, and putting energy into that versus cutting and running and just writing things yourself. That's going to be horribly inefficient. And while it can be frustrating to work with whichever platform you're working with, especially when you're first starting out, it's a necessary skill set that you need to build. So keep beating it up and keep learning and keep going with it, because you just make that agent or whatever you're working with that much better.
Thank you. And actually, when we talk about it, we need also to keep in mind, from a legal standpoint, the data protections, or some even legal
Yes.
implications of using these tools.
Well, yes, and the specific disclosures you need to use by court, and but there's a right way to do it. Like, I've built out for a number of my clients these very specific protocols that we have to update pretty regularly for building, draft, like building a draft, and then editing a draft, to make sure that you're not violating any of the legal specifications of the court, but then also some of the common pitfalls of AI, like hallucinating and um, yeah, yes, and of course the confidentiality piece. You have to use pseudonyms if you're outside of a closed model like Eve. If you're using a Claude, you cannot put in any confidential information in, and so that makes the back end so much more labor intensive.
Even like some places, they started to run a local AI on their service
Yes.
server, which is an
Yeah.
interesting aspect, but will consume lots of their data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
The
absolutely.
space is totally shifting. I was reading, even one law firm decided to dedicate more than 30% of their billable hours for their lawyers to explore and navigate the field of AI.
Yes.
But is there a risk of our existence as legal professionals, as even legal assistants? Because I know even some people that will follow this show are just legal assistants, or they like to work to assist lawyers or paralegals.
I'm not going to say there's not a risk, because that would be silly to think that it's all, it's all good. It's all rainbows and sunshine. It's not. Yes, I think especially where we run the risk is for folks in school or just learning law. Those individuals, we need to kind of keep protected to learn the fundamentals the right way, because I don't think we have enough information on um, how this is all going to play out, and so what skill sets they would need. Because I'm certain, actually, I know with certainty that a lot of law schools are bringing in AI into their curriculum. But one of the issues with that is that they're going to build their curriculum, teach it, and it's going to change. It changes. My conversations about AI literally change every single week based on the new tools that are being rolled out. So it's difficult. It's like they need to learn that skill of how to use AI within law. That's a separate skill from, they need to learn the fundamentals of the law and how to think strategically, sort of outside of using AI. So I don't know. I don't think our brains will atrophy because of AI, but I think they could. And so we need to be very much mindful of that. And I think where at least for me and my clients, where I say, in order to prevent that very thing, is you've got to do work outside of AI and then bring it into AI. So think through everything yourself. Come up with at least your, even if you're just opening up a transcription tool and word vomiting into it, like use your brain first and then move into AI. Because when you start having AI come up with the first draft of things, again, and I don't want to say, because obviously drafting using AI tools is going to cut down on a lot of time. So why would you start yourself? Again, even if it's a word vomit situation, like unorganized thought process, like start with your brain first and then move into to using whatever tool you use.
That's key, definitely. Even the idea of doing a task fully from scratch to end by your skills, or using your skills, or by yourself without using any technology, because you may be under pressure. You may need to draft a quick motion or an affidavit. You need to do it yourself without using other technologies. These are, I think, these are tools to help and assist, and
Mhm.
the balance is needed, because if you use it, or you over rely on it, there is a
Yes.
risk that this could replace your brain, or you won't even use your brain, because the brain is the muscle.
Yes. Yes. And you sort of lose the essence of what it is you're trying to do as you remove your brain more and more from the process. Like at the end of the day, lawyers are trying to help people or businesses with a problem. It tends to be the case. Maybe not with intellectual property work sometimes. Anyway, there are exceptions to that, but they have a problem and they're trying to solve the problem. And the more you delegate actual brain work from how to get to point A to point B, you kind of like lose the humanity in it as well. So you always have to touch it as well. Like don't let the LLM just dictate the entire process. You need to be touching base with it on a regular basis as it, writes or drafts or whatever you're having it do.
And also to keep in mind, in every jurisdiction, there is guidance coming from that jurisdiction. So everyone needs to
Yes.
keep following what's in that
And that
jurisdiction.
and that guidance is changing regularly. So that is part of the back end use of AI, is like you constantly have to be checking the AI disclosures and the whatever the jurisdictional guidance is.
All right. So how would you see responding to these challenges by, or even any difficulty by lawyers? Is the solution always by working harder, or is the solution by adapting to the challenges we have from your perspective in entrepreneurship?
Well, obviously it's not working. It doesn't tend to be digging in and working harder, which is the natural tendency of most lawyers, which is why they kind of burn themselves out, especially when they add starting a law firm or running a law firm to their legal practice, because then they become an operator and and someone running a business. So it it can, things can get out of control really fast in terms of the number of hours you're working. So it shouldn't be to the goal shouldn't be to be working more. It's and I hate the cliche. I hate using cliches, but it's working smarter, not harder. And it is, and that's tough because you have to really check yourself and check yourself, especially when you're falling into the trap of doing things that can and should be delegated to other people, by empowering them to take ownership of those tasks. Um, yeah, and that's very hard to do, especially for somebody who is type A, who likes things done a very particular way and has a hard time delegating appropriately.
And I think also when we talk about these challenges, for example, with adapting to new technology or even adopting it in workplace, uh, the idea is these technologies or these challenges may present their own opportunities. For example, if we talk about 15 years ago or 10 years ago, the capability of a lawyer may not be the same as the capability that we have right now. So it could
Yeah.
mean having more files, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And and adjusting and adapting to meet that demand. The world moves a lot faster than it used to.
Yes, of course. So, could you walk me through the meaning of or the mindset of an operator and the mindset of an entrepreneur or a leader? And are both required in scaling a law firm?
Yeah. So, and when you say operator, are you saying like operating the business or operating their law, like actual being a lawyer, doing law work?
uh, Running a business, but more than doing a legal work, because as doing a legal work can be as part of an employment contract. But I meant by operating, like or running the business, hiring
Hmm.
lawyers, having making sure everything is paid before the end of the month, for example.
Yeah, doing the actual, I see, like making
The
sure
business
the
side of
trains
the
are running on time, so to speak. Yes. So, so the question is, how do you move from those different
uh,
stages or
kind of. I'm trying to cover to see what's the difference between like a person who runs the business and the business who or a person who has the mindset of entrepreneurship, because I assume that some people may have the skill or the mindset to run a business, and they may have a successful small law firm without any issues, but are they entrepreneurs? So
yeah,
that's what the
that's it.
question.
That's like a an existential question, really. So it depends. So first and foremost, you have to decide what you want this business to look like, because we often talk about like getting towards entrepreneurship as the goal. Some people just want to run a business, and they want to run a small law firm as efficiently as possible, and that's totally fine.
Hmm.
And we don't need to do anything big, because a lot of what I do with lawyers who own law firms is start by asking legitimately, what do you want? Because sometimes if that's not established, people just keep going and trying to get as big as humanly possible,
Hmm.
and they've never stopped to think about like, is that actually what I want? Because they've always been trained to kind of like be the best, try to win cases, try to get on top of things, and that's actually like they don't stop to think like, oh, that's actually not why. Like, who cares? If as long as I make enough money to live comfortably, do I even like, why do I want this to get so big? Is it an ego thing? So we've got to start there. So I know I'm dancing around your question, but just we have to start there. Um, but if somebody wants to transition from being a business owner into more of an entrepreneur, which is where you really can scale, if that is what you want, yeah, your mindset has to completely shift. It's has really nothing to do with doing the actual work that you sell, meaning doing legal work, and it is about supporting other people who are doing that work and building systems out appropriately. So it's more kind of orchestrating what's happening versus actually doing what's happening. And again, it's different goals, and those different goals require different mindsets, different skills, because coaching, it becomes like coaching. You're coaching people to do all of this work and to see the bigger vision and to move in the right direction, um, as opposed to a smaller operation where you can kind of be more in the weeds and you can stay there. And that's okay as long as you're happy doing it. Run whatever business you want. It's just having the right tools for the right end goal. is important. And a lot of people have never like stopped to think about that.
Thank you. Traditionally, many people would think when they want, for example, to establish their law firm is that their end goal is to be a big law, and that's
Yes.
actually not the case. And I intentionally asked this question because you can be an entrepreneur if you have, for example, a boutique law firm that
Yep.
actually has a good reputation and is known in your city, in your area.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And again, entrepreneur doesn't have to be doesn't have to be the right way to consider running a business, but it is an option, and it is sort of the, I guess, the more elevated. I don't want to say elevated because I don't want to be disparaging. Some people want to stay in the weeds and they enjoy that. That's okay. As long as everything is running the way you want it to, your clients are happy, your team is happy, and you're making enough money, keep doing what you're doing. But if you do want to make that shift and maybe you don't actually enjoy doing the legal work and you want to see, okay, I've got a great team. We're helping a lot of people. I want to help more people. And maybe I want to make more money. That's okay too. Then shifting gears is really important. And again, it's just a different skill set. Understanding how marketing works, understanding business operations, KPIs. It's not even like paying. You had said like paying the bills. It's not even doing that. You've got to have somebody who's doing all of that work. It's sitting on top of everybody who's doing that work. Um, and then eventually, depending on if you're more of a visionary person, it's also staying ahead of where the market's going and
Mm.
doing more business development work of that nature. So yeah, it's just different, and it's not bad or good. It's just different, and being intentional is I think key, and being able to say the why behind why you're doing what you're doing is important. Again, I hate cliches, and sometimes Simon Sinek, like, understanding your why is a little like, ugh. But you need to understand your why. Like, what are you doing here and why are you doing it? Because without that, everything kind of unravels.
Of course. And I talk with many people working in the law field, and uh, they started to realize the importance of talking about mental health and what
Yeah.
do we actually need from the law practice. I know some people who don't like, for example, to go to the courts, right?
Hmm.
And when we think about being a lawyer, we always picture a person advocating in a courtroom
Yeah.
and uh, representing a party, or even having a criminal case, or even a family law dispute. Uh, but the idea is actually there are some innovative rooms right now specifically to be there, to be in the legal field while putting your conditions of how you're going to do
Yes.
this work.
Yeah. And I think right now, even though there's so much coming at the legal field, right now is actually a really exciting time to be a lawyer because you can specify. Whereas in generations past, I mean, being a lawyer looked a very certain way. Not only like you're going to go to court, but also you're going to be put into this pyramid scheme model where you are at the bottom and only a few work their way up and you have to kill yourself to get up there. And the current generation is not accepting of that. And I think that, having more of a work-life balance is
Yes.
hugely important. And when you are working, you get to choose a little bit more of what you want. And if you have any, more senior listeners, they kind of cringe at this. They get so frustrated because it is a totally different mindset, and they think you should have to go through this. I had to go through this. Um, but you get to choose now more so than ever. Um, but then that can cause friction in multi-generational law firms, which I do. I mean, I definitely think there are so many different ways to practice law right now, and you can be more specific and intentional about what your likes and dislikes are. There's still plenty of legal work to go around. So yeah, you get to choose. You can do contract work through places like Law Clerk. You can really now, I think, is the easiest time to start your own law firm. You can choose to just do things like mediation, doc review. You can do whatever you want. And the sky's the limit. So yeah, like choose your path and go with it. Obviously, being aware of, market conditions and what demand, you do need to look at demand, supply and demand as well, but so be somewhat mindful of that, but you really can structure things the way that you want to. It also depends on how much money you want to make and what you want your life to look like. And then understand too that once you've kind of solidified what it is that you want, there may be a period of time where you have to hustle and you have to work your way up to getting to what you want. That piece, I will say, is important, and I think most people recognize that. But I have talked with some lawyers that they want work-life balance from the get-go, and I respect it, and I say go for it. I just don't know how that. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I was reading about some lawyers even specializing in fashion law
Yeah,
and areas they like.
yeah. That I mean, when you've
In
got
addition,
passion
some
behind it,
people prefer to do. So some people like to do even real estate because they don't like to go to the court, for example.
yeah. Absolutely. And law is an interesting field. You don't have to specialize really, which I find fascinating because um, like I went to grad school for 10 years and you have to get very specialized in what I do. And medicine, you have to do that. You guys can pretty much do whatever you want. You can pick whatever you want and call yourself a real estate attorney. But try on different hats, go for it. Obviously get experience. That's really important. You don't also want to present yourself as an expert in something when you are not, but choose what you want to get experience with, go for it and make it happen. And knowing that you don't have to fully commit either. If you do go into an area of law and you don't enjoy it, you can go to another. It's not like you have to respecialize. So that is one unique quality of law.
Yeah. Almost 1 year ago, I had an episode with lawyer Elaine Furry, and we talked
Hmm.
about the rise of entrepreneurial lawyers and what happens when lawyers think like entrepreneurs. And
Yeah,
here and this year also, I would like to touch base on that concept of entrepreneurial lawyers or legal practice.
yeah,
Um, Entrepreneurs are trained to live with uncertainty, and
yes,
lawyers are trained to spot and flag the risk and minimize them for their clients or even themselves. How to
yep,
balance both approaches if you become an entrepreneurial lawyer.
yep. Yeah, it's uncertainty, comfort. Basically, being comfortable with discomfort is one of the most fundamental skills you need to be an entrepreneur, and also control, relinquishing control, which is goes hand in hand with being comfortable with uncertainty, but control is another huge piece of that.
Yeah, because I mean, you're in legal practice. You're also trained to know how to minimize all the risk. But being an entrepreneur is a different landscape, and that means it comes with its own cost and its own uh, mindset. And that's what I'm trying to cover in this episode. Is the mindset of being an entrepreneur is different from the mindset of being a lawyer. Both can be combined with their own approaches. So it's
Yes.
like a combined approach to coming all together.
Yes, well, it's evolving your skill set to be able to both hold what you need to still maintain your legal skills if you are going to keep practicing law, um, and then push yourself to be able to be in the space of being okay with uncertainty and relinquishing control. So it is there is a lot of mindset work, and I call it leadership development work, but really it's a lot of this is social emotional skill acquisition and development. That you have to be able to become a lot more flexible than you were before. That is a muscle that you have to work. There are many different ways to go about doing that. You also have to be very creative. Creativity is a very important part. And your emotional quotient has to be high. You have to be able to read people, recognize your own emotions, and how the interplay of those two things. And it can be a lot easier to not have to be aware of everybody's kind of social position and emotional state, but it's really important for a leader to scale. And so again, like, it's mindset, it's skills, it's identity. A lot of it is identity work as well. Seeing yourself as the the architect, or the person orchestrating everything versus doing the actual minutia of the business.
Of course. Uh, from your experience, when you speak to many lawyers, do you hear some stories or complaints about mental health, burnout, balancing life with work?
What is so interesting, I actually interviewed like 50 lawyers late last year for an article I wrote. Some will admit that they're teetering on burnout. The majority will not. They either cannot recognize it in themselves, or it's almost like defeat. Like it's like they've accepted that this is just a normal state of teetering on the edge of burnout. And there are lots of different symptoms you look for that. So like, and I don't want to impose my own judgment on people, but I'm a psychologist. I also have my master's in clinical psychology, so I was a therapist for a long time. I can see it plain as day, but they're not necessarily talking about it. So when people tell me, how many hours of sleep they get, how many different matters they're keeping in their working memory, how much time they spend with their families. I mean, these are indicators of emotional well-being. And plus you can kind of, I don't want to scare anybody, but I can analyze how people are talking about things, and you can do some analysis of where their mental state is based on just how they're talking about things. So again, I would say the majority of at least law firm owners that I talked with, and I had a big enough sample size where I can make some assumptions, they didn't recognize or did not want to, like, it was almost like admitting defeat if they would talk about the emotional toll that their current work demands are placing on them. So yeah, so there was a lack of insight, or just didn't want to bring that up as an issue. But some very much will.
Mm.
And really you have to identify and admit it to do anything about it. So if someone's not even seeing it or wants to see it, yeah, there's not a ton that can be done.
And actually, many coaches or psychologists started to offer services designed specifically for lawyers, training in mental health, burnout, and like how to balance life with your work demands and challenges. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how burnout doesn't exist if your work is nonstop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. And some people are designed to kind of work and operate like that, but I think people in the back of their mind want a lot of people, especially high performers, which lawyers tend to fall into that category of high performers, and accomplished individuals. They kind of think of themselves as the exception, not the rule. So I know a lot of therapists and even former lawyers who have become therapists, or just lawyers who've become coaches. They recognize it because most of them are on the other side of their own burnout journey, but their services are only going to be received by a small subset of attorneys, because again, they're not recognizing that burnout, unless their body and mind shuts down, which can happen in a very ugly manner. Sometimes, so that would be way too late to intervene. Now we're having to do cleanup, and yeah, it's messier and uglier. So identifying burnout and overwork, I think, is important, and recognizing it. But there is a challenge there that I've identified.
Hmm. And for many of the listeners we have in this show, some of them may think, what's even needed to run a business or to found a business, and what's needed to be just a regular lawyer and employee. And from here, I'm trying to just get some insights on the differences between being a lawyer and the differences between running a business. And specifically, how can firm owners or entrepreneurs build a structure that allows their business to grow, but doesn't sacrifice their well-being? In another way, do you think if you start to run your own business, you're likely to sacrifice your well-being, your mental health? Does it come with this cost or not?
Oh, it definitely can. I mean, I don't want to say just being a lawyer. Being a lawyer, a standalone lawyer, can come with burnout. When you add the responsibilities of owning a business, which most people grossly underestimate how much work that is, um, of course, burnout becomes even that much more likely. Now, what's interesting, and some of the best, most successful lawyers, and when I say successful lawyers, I mean most successful law firm owners, sort of designed a practice. What they recognized is if they can make their practice big enough, they actually will work less, which is, again, only a small subset of individuals will realize that the bigger your firm becomes, the less work you need to do because you are overseeing as opposed to doing. Um, and they are just kind of more natural entrepreneurs. But to there is a way to do that. So I run what's called EOS. It's Entrepreneur Operating System. It is a way to run any business, and I use it with many of my firms that I work with. And that's its exact purpose, is to figure out how to run a business where the people at the top are not burning out, and empowering individuals at their leadership team and beneath that as well to own certain functions of the business. And by own, I mean they are responsible, they're accountable for it, and they can make decisions independently in terms of how that function runs. And that's where a lot of leadership coaching has to come into play, is that relinquishing control to make decisions to other people.
Yeah.
But that's the
Uh,
key to not burning out.
Thank you. And I think definitely that's one of the solutions. The second thing is, I think many lawyers tend to like to have a messy workflow with the task they do daily.
Yeah.
So, for example, you're dealing with lots of applications you need to file at the court or transaction. Why you don't have a system or a step-by-step process to establish to open that file and to close it? So whenever you handle a case, even in the middle, of that case to another lawyer, that lawyer will be able to pick up from the previous lawyer. That case can be transferred to any legal assistant at any time, even if it's their first day in that law firm. And that comes with having a successful procedure for common applications and cases they do. And the second thing is to utilize technology solutions we have to be able to see what stage you are now in that application. In the beginning, you may think your memory is going to save you, but once you have 100 cases, it won't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What you're talking about is building out standard operating procedures that clearly dictate the workflow of any case wherever you're at. There's, I don't know if you've ever read the book Checklist Manifesto, but I always reference it. And people resist, they think that it is demeaning to get a process, like a written process in place for how they should do their job, particularly high performers and highly educated individuals. So one of my favorite vignettes from the Checklist Manifesto, which is about the importance of a checklist for all processes. And a checklist is, for this purpose, is the same function as an SOP or a standard operating procedure. But they tried to get surgeons to, before and after every surgery, to follow this checklist, and they just wouldn't do it. They were very upset about having to do it. But when they were polled in terms of if they were the patient having a surgery, would they want their surgeon to complete a checklist? And 100% of them unanimously said yes. So it's like they understand the need for it and and statistically, once you roll out SOPs and checklists, whatever, standard operating procedures, the efficacy or the success rate goes up exponentially. But highly functioning humans do not like to be put into a box, and they don't like to be told what to do. So it's this balance of seeing the importance of adopting those standard operating procedures, not just for yourself, but for how it fits into the larger workflow, so that you can systematize this and you can delegate and you can offload certain pieces of a case that can be easily delegated to a non-licensed individual, a well-trained individual. And again, that's where the SOP comes into play.
Definitely. And many people can invest, for example, in a system that would have the cases, would assign the case to an individual, and can save all the documents that out there. The issue is, and this is something many people would notice, you need the legal knowledge and the standard practice or the standardized system for that specific transaction that you'll do, because you need to apply to see what's required in the law in order for this thing to be filed successfully or for this thing to be approved.
Yes, and that's where each kind of case management software, which I think you're touching on as well, it can help you with your systems, but an SOP has to sit on top of whatever software you're doing to oversee the entire systems and functions. But what I would say that has to sit on top of that is your organizational structure and framework. To understand where people sit and who's responsible for what and who is able to make decisions, because you can write the most beautiful SOP, but something may go awry, and who makes decisions about keeping the process moving and how you're going to do that is really important. And then also culture and mindset play a huge role too when adhering to standard operating procedures, because what I found and why I do kind of the work I do, which is both consultative and coaching, because I hired so many consultants throughout my entrepreneurial journey who would just come in and kind of build the systems, but I did not realize that I needed to be there was kind of a leadership gap from where I was and where I needed to be to really stick to these systems and processes. And so that also has to happen, that everyone needs to understand the systems and the why behind the systems in order to follow the systems. Just dumping a bunch of systems on people, adoption rate and efficacy rate are just don't they're very low. People, again, don't like to just be told what to do. They need to understand the why and kind of be a part of the rollout and the training and the ongoing training that needs to happen to have an efficacious system in place. So
Definitely.
it's both.
And also not having multiple systems that don't serve or help your practice. I would
Yeah,
rather have one system that would serve or would store all the documents, have a case, everything, than having three or four. It tends to be harder if you have a multiple than one to two systems.
yeah, technological systems, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want too many, you don't want too few, but they all have to run synergistically. Otherwise it makes people angry.
Yeah, those systems. I mean, I meant technological because you can store the step by step or the checklist you would like to have, and for example, you allow also teams to work in one platform, and they can use or they can pick up from the previous case worker or the
Yeah.
individual that worked on that case.
Hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
I'm here going to use the same term we mentioned when we started the episode, which is the bottlenecks and the profession. So, what are the bottlenecks that you see in the professions? What are the things that you think they are outdated and they don't serve the purpose for modern legal practice?
Well, I mean, I guess I worked with a lot of different firms, so I see different bottlenecks at different stages in different firms. I mean, one is I see so many issues with the initial intake process, when an
Mhm.
individual reaches out to a law firm, that there's a lot wrong, or that could be opportunities for growth there. Just a lot of people that just pick up the phone and ask questions, you know, kind of not thinking through that people are in distress, and just kind of thinking about that from a social emotional lens. So that's I don't want to say that's outdated because I'm not talking necessarily about technology, but it's just more human training that's needed to happen there. Um, and then I think communication with clients is a huge area that needs more modernization. It's not just communication, but helping clients understand where their cases are in the process, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of lawyers forget that these clients are not lawyers. They don't understand the terminology, they don't understand the process, and they need to be educated on that. It can greatly cut down on, there's a lot of research on kind of clients' distress levels and how it can simply be eradicated by better communication. So that's another area that I think technology can supplement. And then the actual how cases get moved forward. So from writing documents to submissions to really every aspect of the case, technology is coming in full force that can help offset some of the human burden around it, but doing it in a way that complements the what they're trying to do for their client in a human way, and from a like actual legal tactical way. Really, there isn't an area of law that I don't think has an opportunity for modernization.
Especially the intake form or the intake process, definitely one of the main areas that can have that business touch. In addition, also, if there is a way to have, for example, a ticket system when a client asks about an update on that matter and the process of updating that client in a
Yeah.
simple, plain language.
Yes, simple, plain language. And I really like, I've seen a number of law firms have, particularly in immigration law, but have case managers who are overseeing all of the cases to make sure that these things are running correctly and to be the person interfacing with a client. I think that's a really, again, a well-trained case manager is excellent. Um, and going out into left field, I've seen a number of law firms, particularly in family law, also hire counselors,
Mm.
because I think they're recognizing that the intersection of law and people coming to them in a distressing situation, they're ill-equipped to handle the human emotional side of that, nor is it efficient for them to handle that. So having a counselor or somebody who can help their clients from a social emotional standpoint, um, is the right path for it. It's better for the client, and they don't have to bill the client at the rate of a lawyer to, if they need to cry, if they need to process, when it's really not serving the case well. So that's another kind of cool, innovative thing that I think I've seen very few firms do, but some do, and it's really exciting. As a psychologist, I completely support that.
And it's an exciting time ahead. For example, even like how you deliver bad news to your clients, the idea of how
Yes,
you deliver. Is there a way to appeal that decision? Is there a step that they can take? So these
yeah,
are some examples of the
yes,
intersection between communication, psychology, legal practice,
yes.
business.
Yes, it is so important because um you can really cause lawyers cause they unknowingly cause their clients trauma that that person carries with them for a long time if they are not trained correctly. And, you know, legal education does not come with all of these soft skills, but people are coming to lawyers at the worst moments of their lives. And lawyers by training are the people who should not be handling, the human side of it. They're not trained at all. So seeing that intersection, getting some training themselves, but then also recognizing when to cut it off, to softly, gently hand them over to a counselor, a coach, something along those lines is hugely important, even if it is messy from an efficiency standpoint. But seeing the client as a whole person, I think is also really important. And some law firms do this exceptionally well.
Assuming that I'm a firm owner and I would like to engage your services in my own firm, what are the things that you could do to help me scale or to help me have that system in my workplace?
Well, what I do, and I mostly work with, like I said, service-based professionals, tends to be mostly lawyers, but that have either one or two owners. So I stick with more small to medium-sized owners. But the first thing I do is work with them to clarify what they want. Because if I jump to what I do for them, and it's not directionally aligned with what their overarching goals are, then it doesn't really,
Hmm.
I don't do like piecemeal work. So first we clarify you know, what this person or these two people or if there are partners in the firm, getting them all together, deciding what they want, either individually or a group or as a group, coming up with a plan, really a strategic vision for the firm, and then working backwards from there. So what I do is audit systems, doing kind of this 360 analysis of the firm and how it's operating currently, and then build, and then we get to work on building systems. I roll out EOS, which is a conceptual framework for how to run a business. Yeah, and we work on systems, and all of those systems, though, are directly in line with what the goals of the firm are. So it doesn't look the same for any two firms, but it's fun and exciting work. I love the work I do, and what I think I really bring for my clients is relief and a path forward for how to scale their business without killing themselves, working so many hours. So yeah, that's what I
Definitely.
do
And
in a
I like
nutshell.
that I like that you sit with the clients and you see what they need. That's the first step is to scan what's missing in the practice or the priorities that they aim to have in their
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, that's one thing too that I did not appreciate when I was an entrepreneur, was that consultants would come in and kind of say what I needed, and I didn't know enough to question that or to look at the bigger picture of where I wanted this business to go. I was a psychologist turned business owner. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I find it irresponsible to not start with that work. And sometimes that work is a little, you kind of have to push people to get to where they talking about what they want and why they want it. I won't just let them say what they want. They have to tell me why. And that's
Mm.
where some psychological work comes in. But again, if you build any systems that are not directly in line with what somebody wants, it's fruitless. I mean, it's silly. So that that is where I always have to start with people.
For all the lawyers that are listening to this podcast today, if they want to be leaders, where they should begin, in your opinion?
Um, I think recognizing really um from all the interviews that I have done with lawyers, the single most important characteristic that you need to have is humility, that you do not have the answers, um, if you want to grow and scale, because
Mm.
you cannot scale without other people and trusting other people. And yes, you're going to get burned sometimes, but you have to have the resilience to keep going with that. Still continuing to be
Mm.
humble, and you don't have the answers. You do not want to be the smartest person in the room. And that's a tough pill to
Mm.
swallow. Some people just can't get there, even though they want to. But I would say being humble and recognizing that you don't have the answers, is really the ticket, and being resilient and being able and flexible.
Definitely. And I think the idea is probably you have the best education, but that doesn't mean you have the knowledge of everything that exists in the world. So you need help
Yeah,
from other people. You need other
a
eyes,
lot of
right?
help. Yeah, a lot of help. You have a very narrow skill set, and it's great. And I tend to not mesh well with owners who have very high concepts of themselves. So, but anyway, so starting with, like, law is important, but it's right here. And if you want to scale, you want to get big, you've got to be able to see the big picture and understand that you only know this um, very narrow area, which is great. And you need additional help to supplement your knowledge base.
Dr. Kate, how can people get in touch with you or reach out to you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Kate Flynn. My website is www.kateflynnphd.com. You can also email me, kate@kateflynnphd.com. Lots of different ways to get in touch with me.
Definitely. I'll make sure I have all of those on the notes of this episode.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kate.
Thank you for tuning in to Threaded Minds, Law and Beyond. I hope today's episode offered valuable insights and inspired new ideas. Stay part of the conversation by following us on Instagram and sharing your thoughts. We always appreciate hearing from you. Remember to leave a review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcast, so you never miss an episode.